Good morning. The last church, the podium was way too tall. Actually, I'm a good height for Europe and Portugal. Well, and you go to the museums and you'll see suits of armor and stuff, and you're thinking, oh yeah, but they're not that tall. I'm like, yeah, I'm one of those guys, that's right. So this morning, it's been a pleasure to be with you guys. We covet your prayers. We covet your, just the fact that you're one of our churches. It's been a huge blessing to be here. And it's humbling to be your representative in Portugal. And today we're focusing on sent. We're focusing on sending missionaries out, going. And this all started, it was because of the last conversation Jesus had with his disciples. He said, go into all the world, make disciples, and I will be with you. And then the next thing was angels going, why are you just standing there? Go ahead, go. And so, so they did. And here we are some 2,000 years later. But it's interesting when you look at the task that he left us with. He said, go into all the world. Okay, from a practical aspect of a missionary, yes, I left, I went to Portugal, I was all excited, yes, I'm going to Portugal, I get to Portugal, we end up out in the countryside in a little town of 25,000 people, and the reality hits you. How in the world am I going to reach Portugal from here? It's 10.5 million people. And they don't want you there. They're not looking forward to hearing from you. And I was like, wow, this is bizarre. You're like, okay, here we go, time to get to work. But then you really think about it too, in the sense of the task of the world, not just Portugal. How many people are out there? I think we're up to like 8.5 billion people. The idea that we can reach that many people, that's kind of daunting to think about. And you're like going, okay, well, that kind of puts a damper on it. Well, but the Bible talks about this, don't build a building unless you count the cost. So it's like, wow, this is a difficult thing to think about. And we're excited. God left us with this task. He left the church with the task of take the gospel and make disciples. Not just here, but you got the planet. Go. Okay. Wow. It's kind of an impossible task when you think about it. And so this morning, because of this, it was like, you kind of need, we're getting into miracle territory. To be able to really pull this off, you need a miracle. Because, just from the practical aspects, this is just a horrendous task. It's a lot to ask. And so I want to look this morning at miracles. And I want to look at a specific miracle. Because it's kind of a training miracle. If you kind of grasp that, it's kind of an idea of He's doing a miracle to kind of teach. Now miracles are interesting because when you look in the New Testament and you actually look at the different miracles and when they happened and what their purpose was and so on, it's kind of fascinating. And what I want to look at too is who instigated the miracle. Okay, so now you have different ideas about this. You've got the miracles where somebody comes up and actually requests a miracle. So they know Jesus, he's been healing people, and so they come up to him and said, we're blind, can you give us our sight? This was in Jericho. They come into town and they hear Jesus going by and they actually scream out and they use the title Son of David as a messianic title. And so Jesus is like, okay, what do you need? And would you heal us? We'd like our sight. And Jesus does it. And then you have miracles that are done on behalf of somebody else. So then you have Jairus' daughter comes to Jesus. She's sick. Will you heal her? You also have the Roman centurion who has a sick servant. This was an interesting one because there's more and more detail in this where the guy comes up and he's like, "Would you heal my servant?" And Jesus says, "Okay, go ahead." Well, he's not a Jew. He's Gentile. And so he goes, no, I understand. Jews don't go into Gentile homes. And I know you have the authority to do this. Amen. You have the power to do this. I understand power. You say something, it gets done. That's power. And Jesus looks at him and just kind of like, wow, this is faith. The Jews don't have this kind of faith. And he said, it's done. Go your way. And he healed them. Then you have the miracle where nobody really asked for it. This was the miracle where he walks into a synagogue and you got a man on the front row. And we're pretty sure the Jews put this guy there because they wanted to trap him because, you're not supposed to heal according to them on the Sabbath. And so here he is, and Jesus knows what's going on. He knows their minds, and he's looking at the guy, and he's looking at them, and he's like, okay, you want to play the game? Let's play the game. And he just looks at him and says, extend your hand. And it becomes completely whole. And then he begins to chew them out. Well, this guy didn't ask for it. He just did it. And the Jews got really upset because, you're not supposed to heal on the Sabbath. But Jesus, to prove a point, there it is, and presented and performed a miracle in their presence. And so now I want to look at one where Jesus performs a miracle, but he's doing it in a training environment. He's actually teaching the disciples something along the way. And that is John chapter 6. John chapter 6. This is the famous feeding of the 5,000. Okay? Now, we're going to apply this and look at this in missions, but it's more in a training sense. So, John chapter 6, we're going to read verses 1 through around 14. Okay, so now, after these things, Jesus went over the Sea of Galilee, which is the Sea of Tiberias, and a great multitude followed him because they saw his miracles which he did on them that were diseased. And Jesus went up into the mountain, and there he sat with his disciples. And the Passover, a feast of the Jews, was nigh. When Jesus lifted up his eyes and saw the great company come unto him, he said unto Philip, whence shall we buy bread that these may eat? And this he said to prove him, for he himself knew what he would do. So he's testing them. Philip answered, 200 pennies worth of bread is not sufficient for them, that every one of them may take a little. And one of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said unto him, there is a lad here which has 5 barley loaves and 2 small fishes. But what are they among so many? And Jesus said, make the men sit down. Now there was much grass in the place, and so that the men sat down in the number about 5,000. And Jesus took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed to the disciples, and the disciples to them that were sat down, likewise of the fishes, as much as they would. And when they were filled, he said unto his disciples, gather up the fragments that remain, that nothing be lost. Therefore they gathered them together, and filled the 12 baskets with the fragments of the 5 barley loaves, which remained over above unto them that had eaten. Then those men, when they had seen the miracle that Jesus did, said, this is of truth the prophet that should come into the world. So Jesus got recognition as well as he was teaching the disciples. Okay, so now let's follow this. We also have parallel passages in Mark and in Luke that talk about the same event. And so what was the task at hand? The task at hand was, hey, Philip, where do we buy bread? Now, if we go over one of the other parallel passages, we find out that the original question was, hey, Philip, we got a multitude, feed them. And apparently, Philip just had this blank look on his face, because now when we get to Mark, he rephrases the question. Because Philip is like, what? Feed them? Okay, so we get here, and so, okay, let me simplify this. Feeding them, they need bread. Where do we go buy bread? And Philip looks at him again and just kind of like, what? Now, we know he's puzzled by this. Philip's not quite getting this because Philip's response tells us what was going on in his head. Philip, let me ask you a question. Did Philip actually answer Jesus' question? No. If you think about it, this is kind of an awkward thing for Philip to do because Philip looks at him and goes, where to go buy bread? You don't get it. We don't even have the money, let alone a place to buy it. Now, think about that for a second. You have a huge multitude that's following a man they think is the Messiah who's healing people. He's performing miracles. And you look at him and say, you don't know what you're asking. Buy bread. We don't even have the money to buy bread for that group. You're missing the point. That's an interesting thing. You look at Jesus and go, I think you're missing the point. Not a good call. But as humans, we get caught up in the moment and we're like, wait, are you kidding? And it's not necessarily a bad thing because the Bible does tell us, count the cost before you build a building. You just don't jump. You need to kind of have an idea. Okay, well, how do you relate that to go to the world? I'm counting the costs and it doesn't add up. I mean, it really doesn't. But yet we're just supposed to launch? And so here's Philip. I don't think you get the point. This isn't possible. You're asking for something that I can't do. So then he goes to Andrew. Now, you go back to the other passages. Sorry, the carpet just scared me. I was like, I'm off the edge. This is actually kind of nice. I like the platform to be able to do this. But so he looks around, and then Andrew shows up, and he's got this kid with 5 loaves and 2 fishes, right? But if you go to the parallel passages, Jesus actually sends them out to go look for food. Okay, so it's just not, hey, there's a kid here. No, Jesus stopped them and said, well, what do we have? And so they went out looking for food. Now, disciples, imagine this. I mean, you've got this huge group, 5,000 men, so there's more. There's probably 10,000 plus people out there. And the disciples are roaming through the place. Anybody got any food? I mean, that's kind of sorry, okay. But this is what they did. And so they bring the kid forward, they got the food. And they said, but here's the lad, he's got the food. Now, what was Andrew's response? That's what we got. That's the task. It doesn't add up. Okay, they're thinking logically. We're counting the cost here. This isn't going anywhere. So it's insufficient. Now, this is actually a common reaction on our part as humans. It's very, very common. This was the same situation with Moses. God's like, okay, you've had 40 years in Egypt, you've got 40 years in the desert, I think you're ready, I need to send you back. And Moses is going, what? No, I can't do this. I'm insufficient for the task. And you got to look from God's perspective, what do you mean insufficient? I put you in Pharaoh's home. You were trained from a young age all the way up. You know multiple language. You know how the court functions. You know the ins and outs of what goes on in the government. You've roamed the population as a prince of Egypt. Then I took you out to the desert and introduced myself to you, and we've had time in the desert. And I've spoke to you. And now you're telling me that, hey, great idea, but not me, I'm insufficient? I prepared you for this. And there's numbers of times of people where God says, okay, there's the task, go for it. And they back up and go, no, I'm not the person for that. And it's sad, but that's the situation. But that's the same thing that happened here. This won't work. This doesn't add up. So, okay, now, let me get to the part where who has bread? And now we have the little boy with the lunch, right? Now, okay, here's the part of the story that we're going to kind of read between the lines. You're not supposed to do that very much in the Bible. You're supposed to stick close to what's, it said this. Okay, that's great. We're going to say, we're going to stick exactly to what it says. However, you have Andrew with the boy, and then you've got Jesus over here on the other side. The next verse, he's praying and he's breaking. Okay, wait a minute. How did it go from there to here? This is what I mean. Going through the crowd, you got the disciples. Anybody got any food? Anybody got any food? Lunch? You guys bring lunch? Nobody brought lunch? Nobody brought lunch. You guys don't have lunch? Nobody's got lunch. Hey, you. Did you bring a sack lunch? Yeah. Can you come with me? Okay. So now this boy is being led to Jesus. What's going on in his brain? What's he thinking? I've got food. They're looking for food. Nobody else brought food. Now I'm going to see the master who we all came to see. Okay. What's going on in his head? He's looking at the crowd, looking at his lunch, looking at Jesus going, what's going on? What's the reality of this? Is he thinking that Jesus is going to perform this great miracle? We don't know. The disciples didn't know this. They didn't know what was coming. I mean, everybody knows, feeding of the 5,000, we know what's coming, right? Okay, this is what's going to happen. We all know this. But what's going on in this boy's head? Is he thinking this? Probably not. You never know with kids. Kids can sometimes launch into stuff and you're going, are you crazy? My daughters, we go see a coach museum or something, and now they're all excited. They want to build a coach for a goat, to be pulled by a goat. And they're like given the plans and everything else, and you're like, we can build this. We don't even have a goat. But they're ready to build it, So they're ready to launch out. And then you get kids, you've ever had this happen, where you're discussing finances in front of your kids? And things are tight, you're trying to make it last, whatever, and then they bring you their piggy bank. Will this help? They don't get, they're like, we're talking about thousands of dollars and you've got a couple dollars, but they're ready to jump in, be a part. Will this help? They're ready to offer it. So, it's possible that maybe the kids kind of focus on this as a miracle, but if the disciples didn't get it and they weren't focused on this, I don't know if the child was. And so he's showing up, probably most likely, he's thinking, the disciples messed up. Nobody had lunch planned out, and now the master is tired and he's hungry. Maybe I'm going to be sharing my lunch with the master. Could be. A couple options there, but that's more than likely probably where he was at. Well, at least the master can eat, because we're all here to see him, right? Okay, so now he's got a lunch in his hand. The next thing we see is Jesus has the lunch in his hand. How did it go from there to there? Did the disciples say, cool, you brought a lunch, good on you, however we need it, thank you very much, and just confiscate it? Who wants to believe the disciples confiscated the boy's lunch? Probably not. Did Jesus just say, great, confiscate the lunch? No. I have to believe that Jesus walked up to him and said, hey, we've got a problem here. We need food. Are you willing to share your lunch with me? The boy's like, well, I came to see you. So, sure. Then Jesus goes on to do the miracle. He prays, he offers it to the Lord, blesses it, and then begins to break it. Now, where's the boy? I would love to find out one day that they just didn't send the boy back to the crowd. It's his lunch. So I have to believe he's like, oh, no, stay here. Have a seat. Watch this. This is going to be cool. I can imagine the boy just sitting down going, okay, let's see what's going to happen. And he begins to break the food, and it just starts going everywhere. And it just keeps going and keeps going and keeps going. And the boy's like, well, that's bizarre. This is cool. And, oh, I'm sorry, are you hungry? Yeah, then here, have some. And so now the boy's eating, watching this. And it goes on through 15,000 people. Now, can you imagine what this boy went through when he got home? Walks in the door. His mom goes, so, how did it go? Did you see the master? And he's like, yes, I saw the master. And you are not going to believe what happened. Apparently somebody messed up and they didn't bring food. So, I shared my lunch with Jesus and he fed the whole group with my lunch. And imagine the mom's like, what? Really? Wait just a second. Goes outside, goes to the neighbor. My boy just told me this. Oh, yeah, we saw that. We were there. We ate his lunch. Back to the boy. Incredible. Tell me everything. What did Jesus say? I want to hear it all. Can you imagine? That's just bizarre to be able to do that. And so, okay, great. So now, Jesus blessed it, and he passes it out, and he does it. Now, we go back to the start of this. Jesus did this for a reason, and he asked specific questions. And the Bible even says, because he knew what he was going to do. He gave them a task, and the two major responses were, are you kidding? You don't know what you're asking. Feed them? We couldn't afford to feed them. We have a drop in the bucket what requires what you're asking. You're asking the impossible task. So, okay. Interesting thing with the next statement. Okay, go see what we do have. Brings up, this is completely insufficient. Right. Got it. Let's bless it and give it to the Lord. Then he performs the miracle. The reality is, he gave them a task that was impossible. But did he actually ask them to perform a miracle? No. He said, just go do it. That's the task. Figure it out. They came back. We can't do this. Exactly. You can't. That was the point. So how do we do this? This is a training miracle. How do you do this? You start with what you have and you give it to the Lord. He knows how to break it, to multiply it, and put it where it needs to be. You just have to trust him on that. What he was asking for was participation. Are you going to jump in or not? Or are you just going to say, look, it doesn't add up. I can't even imagine doing this, and walk away? That was Moses. He wanted to walk away. And God said, no, I've invested way too much into you. You're not just walking away. You can't do this. And he finally got him to where now, in Israel, Moses is everything. But in the beginning, Moses didn't even want to go. So, how do we relate this to send and to missions? We have the impossible task. Go into the world. How in the world are we going to reach 8.5 billion people? In a real sense, we just go. God's going to work that out. We have to start with what we have. And you're thinking, okay, so when it comes to churches and sending, that is picking somebody out, who's led by the Spirit that wants to go, who is God sending? And then we as a church get behind them and we send them. But it's a drop in the bucket. It doesn't matter. Some of the greatest heroes in the Bible, some of the greatest people that we look up to are prophets who were so in tune with what God can do, they literally had almost no fear. You remember the prophet who showed up in front of an Assyrian army, and the servant is in panic mode. He's like, do you realize what's in front of us? And the prophet is like totally unbothered by this, looks and goes, yeah, so what? And he's like, but look, it's an army. Yep. Okay, God, can you open his eyes? And then now he's seeing the spiritual world and he sees God's army in front and he's like, oh, we're not alone. And he goes, exactly. Or you've got, was it Elijah and the 800 prophets, 400 from Baal, or 450 from Baal and 400 from another God, and they're like, he's the only prophet left in Israel. And he's like, okay, goes before the king. The king's ready to kill him, but he's like, no, we got one contest we're going to do. We're going to see whose offering gets God, whose God sends fire down to destroy or to consume the offering. And so then you have him with one of the shortest, greatest prayers. After they've had all this time with their offering and no fire comes down, he simply walks up to his after drenching it with water, and then simple prayer. Okay, Lord, it's you're up. Show them who you are, and show them that I have been speaking your words. Fire drops and it's over. They have absolutely no fear because they know what God can do. Then you got Jonah. Remember Jonah, Nineveh's ready. This one is fascinating to me because it's almost in the opposite. Jonah, one of the most reluctant missionaries ever. God knows the timing. He knows when to do things. He knows when people are ready to hear. He moves people around to where it's the perfect timing. We don't have that capability. God knows when that happens. Why am I here, Lord? Just hold on. No, but there's nothing happening. Just hold on. But Lord, this is like a dead zone. Just hold on. Okay. So here's Nineveh. These are the worst enemy to Israel. And God says, they're ready, go preach. He knows the power of God and he knows what God can do, and he goes the opposite direction. Why? Because he knows if he goes and preach, they will repent, and he doesn't want to see them repent. That's how much he knows about God's power. He got on a boat and went the opposite direction because he knew exactly what God could do. God said, nice try. Invested too much in you. You can do this. Spit him up on the ground and then sent him off. He walks through Nineveh, preaches for 3 days. They repent. Because God knew when to send. And so here, they expected a miracle from God. So in essence, as a church, when we look at this task of sending, and you're like, but this is impossible. We can support a few missionaries here and there, all over the place, and other churches do the same thing, but in the reality, can we really reach the world? It's an impossible task. Exactly. How do we approach impossible tasks? We start with what we got. We give it to the Lord, pray over it, and then expect a miracle from God. That's the formula he just taught them. And the prophets that worked with God in the Old Testament, they all stood on the line because they expected God to perform a miracle. They were waiting for it. They knew it. And that's where we're at. If I could use my church in Portugal as an example, we have people from China. There's a church in China. He's a refugee. The church kept getting raided by the police. He's been in prison like 2 or 3 times. He finally gets on a plane and leaves because he's getting beat up too much. And he ends up in our church. How did he end up there? Came from a church in China. What's a church in China? How did the church in China get there? I don't even know where it's at. Somebody down the line shared their lunch with China. And God took it, started a church. We have a guy from Congo. He's from a church in Congo. How did that church get there? Somebody shared their lunch with Congo. We got it from the Ivory Coast. You have a church in the Ivory Coast? Yeah, I'm from a church in Ivory Coast. How did that church get there? Somebody shared it, shared their lunch with the Ivory Coast, and God took it, broke it, multiplied it, knew where to send it at the right time in the church in Congo. I grew up in a church in Hawaii. How did that church get there? A church in California shared their lunch and sent a missionary to Hawaii. And then me and my family came to know the Lord. We got saved. You know, the fun thing is, we went back to that same church, and they now support us in Portugal. And I'm a direct descendant of that church. When we're presented with the impossible task, it's not the time to say, look, it doesn't add up, we can't do it. If God gave us the commission to do it, then we take with what we got, we start with that, we give it to the Lord, we bless it, and then we expect God to perform a miracle. And let him do it. And get out of the way and just let him do it. One of the greatest things we get to do as missionaries, we come back to churches. We get to show you what's been going on in Portugal. And we go, you guys have a part in that ministry. Thank you for sharing your lunch in Portugal. Those people on the screen are eating your lunch. You shared it with us. God took it, broke it, multiplied it. Now, they're going to go off and share their lunch with somebody else as well. And one day we'll find out how far our lunch actually goes. And that will be fun. That will be a huge blessing. Going, I had no idea that this lunch went all the way to there. And so basically, when we're talking about missions, the next couple weeks, you guys can be going through missions. Yes, it is an impossible task. And yes, the world looks at us and goes, you guys are crazy. Why are you sending people all over the world? Because God's last thing he said was go. Feed the world. That's the same thing he told the disciples. You got a big crowd there, they need to be fed. How are we going to do it? You start with what you got. You give it to the Lord, let him bless it, and then expect